Thanks for being here. We're thrilled that you're here, to say the least, and I know I speak for so many other people. I know some people will look at you when you transition in and will say, why? What? I mean, like not in a bad way, but like, you know, so you're an assistant superintendent, and you do a great job. You've been a principal. You've done all these different, you know, kind of vocations within the context of education, and you're deciding to close that chapter and start something brand new, but something brand new that is a totally different road for you. So tell us why. And I mean, we're all excited, and we wouldn't want it any other way, but explain to us how you came to this decision.
I guess I would say that I always knew that I didn't want to leave education. It was time in the public school, in your contract, it's time for you to retire when you're at 55, and I've had 33 years.
33 years?
Yeah, even despite having 3 children, I've never taken really any time off. So when I hit 55, which is my first age of eligibility, I've got the 30 plus years and it was time to retire. But I really knew I didn't want to leave. So I truly did a lot of soul searching of what did I want to do and how did I envision myself. And I am a person who always visualizes. I like to think about the future and sort of imagine how things are going to happen. And honestly, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And it was December. I do the consolidated application for all title schools in my current position.
So explain that for people that might not know what that means.
So
and actually, I don't know what that means. That's why I'm asking.
That's okay. The consolidated application for title programs. So title monies are given by the federal government to the state government to the local schools based on students' economic situations. And as one of my many roles, I do the entire application for West Hill. And part of that application is we need to go to all private and parochial schools, see if there's any students who financially would qualify for title monies, and is the district interested or the school interested in those monies. And I needed to go and get a signature because some status had changed with Holy Family. And so I went to see Sister Helen, and I walked into the school, and this was probably right before Christmas.
Yeah.
I walked into the school, and it was just such a joyful place. Mm-hmm. And I had such a great feeling when I walked in that I really thought, this is where my heart is.
Yeah.
I love, I've enjoyed my 7 years as an assistant superintendent. It's been immensely rewarding and challenging. But I was born to be an elementary principal.
And you never stopped being an educator.
No.
You know, when people talk about vocation, so a lot of times people say, well, gosh, Father Cliff, when did you know that you want to become a priest? Or Sister Marcia would say, when, Sister Marcia, did you know that you're going to be, a sister, a religious sister? And it's hard for us to explain it, but it's like a tugging at our heart that we know it's the right thing. It's like falling in love with somebody. And when you fall in love with someone and somebody else comes up to you and says, what does that mean? Why do you love that person? Well, no matter what we say, the words can't quite capture how we feel, right?
Justice.
And so with this, it sounds as though this tug towards a Catholic school and a new chapter was something that God had in store for you and was just waiting for the right time to let you know that this is the right path.
Yeah, I agree with that. I knew when I was in 6th grade, I told my parents I was going to go to Nazareth College and I was going to be a teacher. And that has been my vocation all my life. And when I really reflect back on my career, my happiest times were the times where I was working directly with students and families and parents and staff on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Educationally as well as even in a public school, as well as spiritually, because there is and there should be a form of that service learning, those character traits and virtues.
The understanding of the social contract, right?
Absolutely.
That we all have responsibility.
Absolutely.
We're in the midst of the terrible death of Mr. Floyd and the protests in different cities. You've probably seen this, but in Oregon, the city that I saw it on TV, that there were protesters, and the police officers came face to face with the protesters. And what everyone expected was there to be some kind of confrontation, and instead, the police officers knelt down on one knee and get choked up about it. And then the protesters did the same thing. And I look at it in the context that in our lives, and the idea of the social contract, God's always going to be a part of that solution. You know, St. Augustine says that, you know, our hearts are restless until they rest in God. And I think for Catholic schools, and I think you're a perfect person for this, but for Catholic schools, we educate the whole person, you know, and it's where young people get a sense that they're born with dignity, and no one can ever take that away. And that our charge is to make sure that they believe that they're born with dignity, and that we foster that dignity in what we say, and what we do, and how we pray. And we just think you're going to be a great addition with regards to that, and we thank you for being here. I wonder if I could ask maybe a little bit about your family.
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about your family. Tell us one thing that maybe nobody knows about your family. So this would be brand new.
Brand new.
Yeah. Other than that Father DiLorenzo was your pastor, and he's a great pastor.
About my family, I had my daughter when I was 40.
That's great.
I don't think that many people probably know that.
Yeah.
I married my high school sweetheart. We started dating when we were 16, which now seems like forever ago.
That's great.
And we like to laugh and say had our rough spot when we were in college, and then came back together and got engaged my junior year. And
Did you both go to Nazareth?
no, my husband went to school in Auburn at Cuba.
Oh yeah, sure, beautiful.
And worked full-time at the business which he now owns. That was his aunt and uncle's originally.
That's great.
I graduated from college. I had already accepted a position as a special ed teacher in Liverpool and got married. I graduated in May. I started full-time substitute teaching at a private school in Rochester until the end of June. I got married in July.
You know, I come from a family of 6. My oldest brother passed away this past September. And a lot of times we, you know, as brothers, as men, we think, oh, we got it the hardest. We don't. There's so many things that we could never do that women do. You know, and so I'm thinking about your approach to education and family life, and you balance those, right? So, you know, you were getting your advanced degree, your certificate for, you know, administration, while you had a full-time family. What was that like?
Yeah. Well, I actually, I got offered my first administrative position before I finished my CIS, and I was 9 months pregnant with my son Kyle.
See, we can't do that. Even
I would
there's
agree.
no way. There's just.
I would agree.
I get a hang now and I'm done for the day. Like I can't do anything today. Wow, how did you do that?
I think you prioritize. You know what's important. You know, I've always said when I became a principal, you know, my boys were not quite, Kyle was not quite 2 when I first got my first principalship, and Kevin was 5 and started kindergarten. And I remember staff saying to me, you know, how do you do that? You know, what are your hobbies? Well, I have no hobbies. I have no hobbies. It's the choices you make in life, and I never have regretted any of my choices. You know, I had my work was my hobby, and then there was my family, and when I wasn't working, I was with my family. And again, I always tell my kids, life's all about choices.
Tell us about that first year teaching. So you're a teacher in Liverpool, your degree's in special ed. Tell us about that, the first classrooms, first experience. It's daunting, right?
It is, and you have to think, when I started in education in 1987, special education was self-contained. There was...
And so for people watching that might not know that, what does that mean?
Right, that means that you had a class of, in my case, no more than 12 students who really remained in that classroom all day long for education. They were mainstreamed. They were sent out for specials at their various grade levels or at lunchtime, but all of their instruction was with me, and they were never with any other typical peers.
Right.
And I knew that going into it, there was no inclusion at that point in time. And I had the wonderful opportunity of being sort of attached, sort of, pseudo-like, with a team of teachers, 3 teachers, and they taught multi-age. So there were second, third, and fourth graders in their classrooms, and there were times when they were age grouped, and there's times that they were heterogeneously mixed according to lots of different, in lots of different situations. And my students only went to their classes for their specials over lunch. And it wasn't probably many months into it that one of the teachers, Marianne Kyler, came to me and said, you know, you're teaching whatever topic for science, I'm teaching that topic. Why don't we combine our classes? You take half, I'll take half, and we'll mix your kids in, and we'll both teach science.
And that was mainstream, right?
And that was the first step into an integration. And I did that for 3 years with the multi-age team. I was a full team member. It was one of the most incredible experiences. I had 3 phenomenal teachers I worked with. And in the meantime, Liverpool had started the first inclusive programs. We had students who had been at Jewelio and who were transitioning to school age. And the director of special ed came to me my second year and said, I really would love for you to go and start the inclusive 3rd grade class for the district. And I said, oh, you know, I hate to leave, and I've got so many good things going. And she said, okay, well, no problem. And the next year she came to me and said, I really would like you to start the inclusive 4th grade program, and I'm not coming back to ask again. So I achieved my tenure, and I switched from, I started at Nate Perry Elementary on Bucky Road, and I switched to Willow Field, and I was there for 5 years through the birth of my first son, Kevin, our first son, Kevin. And I really had a wonderful experience. Did a full inclusive program where I had a full-time, there were 2 full-time teachers in the classroom, myself and another gentleman, Chris Kopp, and really just a life-changing experience.
Do you think that because your first swing in education was about individuals that in many ways had been marginalized by the educational system and were trying to be kind of integrated within it, do you think that you have a greater awareness and appreciation for individuals that might be marginalized or that need to have a little bit more special attention to know that we're educating the entire person, mind, body, soul?
Oh, absolutely.
So you have a greater awareness, and how does that awareness shape your own kind of management style?
Well, I think you learn to see things from multiple perspectives, and you're always trying to put yourself in someone else's perspective. If you asked my mother, she would tell you I grew up wearing my heart on my sleeve, and that I felt, in her words, I felt things deeply.
Yeah.
I've always been the champion of the underdog. It's been my life's vocation.
Isn't that the challenge? I mean, so if you hear people nowadays, they talk about Black Lives Matter and the Floyd situation just across the country. Isn't the greatest criticism is that there's not a greater level of empathy?
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So we live in a society and a culture that sometimes transactionalism becomes the way that we interact with people, and yet transactionalism doesn't teach the dignity of the person. Right. It's really about empathy. So that empathy was kind of developed in your first year teaching. You went into, you were a principal of a school, you're an administrator, and now you're here. And again, we're thrilled, but tell us, when you applied for that position, when you looked at the position, you kind of checked this out a little bit, right?
I did.
Like a good teacher, right? When I was at Lemoyne,
I was talking to you and you guys didn't even know.
We didn't know, well, yeah, that's not uncommon for me, actually. But when I was at Lemoyne, my degree was in education, and Mary Collins was the chair. And she always said that before you start in classroom or you start in school, make sure you go and get the lay of the land, and be the first one to that class, because then, you see people come in. So tell us what you learned about us when you kind of searched around and investigated that kind of led you to pursue this.
I think what stood out to me when I did a couple different types of research. I first just researched online because you can learn a great deal about a school when you're looking at their online presence and reading about them. And I think for me, what was the selling point was the idea of the service learning, because that's so important to me. You know, I've raised my own children to believe that you stand up for what's right, you give back, you help people who don't have. You know, I've always said to my own kids, you know, we are fortunate, we are blessed in life because we have so many things to offer, and we have, you know, a solid family, and we have a roof over our heads, and we have food on our table, and that there are many people who don't have that. And you know, my first principalship, over 50% of my student population was on received free and reduced lunch, and my children would come to school when they were little at that time. They would come to school and they would see their clothes. They would never say a word, but they would notice it. They'd notice their sneakers because they knew it. That mom had students who needed that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the unique things about the Academy is that we have families that are truly, you know, they believe in Catholic education and the tradition of the Catholic Church, but they have a history here at St. Mary's and at the Academy. But it's not just parents, it's grandparents. I can't tell you the number of grandparents that are so heavily involved in the education of their grandchildren, even, you know, assisting financially with the tuition. So for parents and families and grandparents, they see the Academy education as a great priority, and they're willing to sacrifice themselves to allow their children to receive that education. And it sounds like you get that from the very beginning. Yeah. One of the things that I think you're so proud of is and we are too, but the blue ribbon status that was achieved for one of the schools. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So when I was principal at Cherry Road for 11 years, we really embraced over a period of time, because any type of new change, everyone needs to buy into it. We really embraced the idea of a professional learning community. And some of the basic tenets, you know, being able to answer those 4 essential questions. What is it we want students to know? How will we know when they've learned it? What will we do when they don't? And what will we do if they already know it? And from there, we really believed that they were not your children or your children, they were our children. And that together we needed to collectively ensure that everyone would be successful. Yeah. And because of that, when really, as any time you get that guiding coalition and you get a group of people who really believe it, you as the leader kind of watch that blossom. And that's really what happened at Cherry Road. And as a result of that, we really firmly committed in lots of different ways to what we called an intervention block. So we would we would teach ELA, and then we would do an assessment, and we would sit down collectively together, all the teachers, myself, some special educators, AIS providers, and really examine the results and really look at who got it, who didn't, and what were really some of the most essential. You really need to identify what's your most essential learning. And from there, we would have intervention time where everyone would be all hands on deck, working with students to either address the gaps or enrich students who needed it.
There's 3 words you used that are really crucial, right? You used the word "our," you used coalition and collaboration. Those are huge, because it sounds as though that when you pursued the blue ribbon status, that it wasn't the I, right? It was the we, and that was why it was successful.
Mm-hmm. Well, and truly, we pursued not even the blue ribbon. We pursued just simply making sure that everyone had an equitable education, and that we really developed a plan to address the needs of all students at the higher end as well as the lower end. And in New York State, you were actually selected to apply for a blue ribbon status. And so we got notification that based on our assessment results, that we were identified as a high achieving school.
We're excited that you're bringing that excellence here. You know, as a parent, you know that there's a lot of anxiety, especially nowadays. Anxiety about, what will things look like in the fall? There's not a lot of answers that we have. But communication is a big part of what it means to be a principal. I think kindness is always a really big part. I think inclusion is a big part. But I wonder, as we kind of bring this to a close, if you could give us your model of communication. How do you see your role in communicating to parents what's happening, what's going to happen, and how can you help all of us to stay on the same page and receive communication and not get anxious? Because it's natural, and I'm the same way. If I don't have information, I get anxious. So how would you address some of those things for our families?
Well, communication is key, especially in the midst of what's happening right now, and the understanding that it's going to change. I just said to Sister, the governor just released graduation guidance. It's probably about our 6th edition of graduation guidance. So
that's important for people to hear. So the governor released graduation guidance, but since the very beginning of this, there's been 5 previous times that's come out. So and Sister Marcia talks about this a lot, but it's constantly changing.
Oh, it is, yeah. Absolutely. And so one of my roles right now in West Hill is I've sort of been compiling all sorts of different resources to try and help us. So we have different subcommittees that are looking at the reopening and what might that mean. What will be our office protocols? What will be our busing protocols? What will be our cafeteria? And so I've been trying to compile resources to help all those groups. I'm not in a group because I will not be there. But I've been compiling resources, and it's interesting. You get one set of guidance. I was on a Zoom the other day with the CDC and a ASCD, which is a curriculum nationwide or worldwide curriculum group, and they wouldn't publish any of the CDC slides in the presentation because it changes that quickly.
Really?
And they don't want people to have access to out-of-date.
Interesting.
They want you to go to the CDC site. So
sometimes communication means not saying something just yet, to hear what might be coming down the pike.
Right now, here's what we know. And here's some ways that could happen. And, we will be, we'll be updating you, letting you know what's changed. But having those constant updates, but knowing that it might change. I also think it's important to have multiple stakeholders at the table. When you're looking at, and I get it because I'm a mom, first and foremost of anything. And when I want to send my Kelly back in September, I want to know that she's going to be safe, and no one's going to be perfect, but that we're doing the best we can.
Yeah. And that's what makes your empathy so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because you don't ever step out of that role.
Right.
You don't ever step out of that role. How many times as a principal did I call a parent, and I might have had a student in with me, and talk to the parent, and the parent talked to the student, and then I had to have the student go outside, and I'd say to the parent, okay, this too shall pass. Yeah. It's okay. It's part of the learning lesson, and you have to always remember being on that other side of the table or the phone call, and hearing that news that you might not really want to hear, and how do you say to and what you say to a parent and what you say to a student lasts.
So I have 2 final questions for you.
Sure.
The first is, how would you define your typical day as a principal? What time do you get here? What time do you leave? What's it look like?
I am an early riser.
What's an early riser?
Well, for me, in a normal school, I'm up by 4:45, and I was usually in the office sometime between 6 and 6:30.
Wow. So first year?
That's even just up till...
Recently?
Yes.
Right.
When we
Sister Marcia, Sister Marcia, I love her like a sister, truly. Mornings are not good for either one of us. We both were assigned, please don't talk to me before the second cup of coffee. So you're here early, typical day, 6:30, you're in the office.
And I will tell you, it's funny, one of my very dearest friends who was a teacher at Cherry Road, and truly, I have two retired teachers who to this day I'm very close with. She said to me, now, here is your chance to have a little more balance in your life with this weird computer. She said, I'm going to text you that often so that you remember that.
We'll put it outside for you.
Yeah.
And so during the day, what's it look like for you?
During the day, I think, well, I start my day and end my day with greeting children. I greet them in the morning and I say goodbye to them in the afternoon. I think that's really important. You're in the cafeteria, you're in and out of classrooms. You know, there are certain things certainly that you have to take care of in terms of management of a building. And I think that's one of the draws for me is the size of St. Mary's.
Yeah.
And then I feel like I've always felt like I had a strong connection with my students especially, but absolutely here.
Yeah. And what time do you normally leave? Please don't tell us it's 6.
No, you know what? I have always tried to maintain that I choose my afternoon time based on kind of what's happening with my kids.
Right.
So dinner at home as a family is an absolute must.
That's great.
My husband's business doesn't start till 9, so he's always done the morning, but his business doesn't close till 6. So I've always been it depends on their age. Right now, on a typical day, I'm probably home somewhere around 4:30 or 5. That gives Kelly a little bit of time, but then she's not home a lot on her own. Her brothers, I haven't really mentioned the boys, so I have a son, Kevin, who's married and lives in Washington, D.C. He has always worked for nonprofits and just took a position this past year with Events DC, so his role is really to promote everything DC. He's married to a wonderful, wonderful girl, Sarah.
Can't go wrong with the name.
Yeah, exactly. Who's just an absolute gem, as Kelly's sister, as she says.
Yeah.
I have a son, Kyle, who works in the family business with my husband. He is in the business of, I won't say it's a business, but he has bought several houses and has fixed them up and sold them. Unexpectedly sold his second one right at the time and closed right at the time that the pandemic hit, which probably worked out okay.
Yeah.
So he and the dog are back home with us for a little while.
What's the dog's name?
The dog's name is Hunter. So we have a pug named Princess.
And what kind of dog is Hunter?
And Hunter is a German Shepherd Black Lab mix. So
We're fond of dogs here, so it's good. It's a
good.
positive thing.
Hunter has an exuberance. Princess is sort of like...
Is that a translatable word? Exuberance, does that mean like over-exuberance? Or just like...
labs. They're puppies forever.
Yep, I do know. Very few socks are totally solid.
Oh my gosh, he's a character. He's stuff-like. As big as he is, when he really wants to be quiet, he's amazing how he can see things.
You've met Bruno. There's nothing about him that's stealth. As golden retrievers get bigger, their butt gets bigger, and so there's nothing he can do that's stealth. So even if he's trying to sneak something, he makes lots of noise. As we close it, I wonder if you would just want to say anything to the families, the students, your fellow teachers, our administrative staff, and to the parish. Is there anything you want to say to them as we kind of begin this new chapter together?
Absolutely. I want to say that I'm very excited. I appreciate your patience as I kind of close one chapter, but I'm excited to open up the second chapter. And I look forward to us working together in a true partnership for the betterment of St. Mary's Academy, which is already, in my opinion, a wonderful place.
One of the great things that Sarah did in the course of the interviews is that she would pray. So you were asked to pray almost at every part of that interview stage. Would you want to close us in prayer?
Oh, absolutely. The way I was raised always made the sign of the cross. So honestly, the Holy Spirit.
Sometimes forget that, so it's good to remember.
That's okay. That's old school. Dear God, Thank you for the many blessings you give us each and every day, and thank you for bringing all of us here together to talk about St. Mary's. We love you, and we appreciate and need your blessing, especially during these challenging times. Please, Lord, look upon the children and the families and the staff of St. Mary's. Guide them and watch over them during these times until that we can all be together. Amen.
That's great. Thank you very much. Thanks for being here. And we're all going to pray for you, and we're just thrilled you're here.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.